If your me-made garments feel tight across the bust or have excess fabric pooling above, a full bust adjustment, or FBA for short, can help. You may know how to do an FBA on a bodice with darts, but what if your pattern doesn't have them? Fear not, here's how to do an FBA on a dartless bodice. To determine if you need an FBA and by how much, check out our blog post link below. Once you've done that, you will need a traced copy of your front bodice pattern, a pen or pencil, a ruler, scissors, tape and some extra paper. Hold the front bodice piece up to your body, making sure that the shoulder seam is overlapping your shoulder by the pattern seam allowance and that the centre front line is running down the centre of your torso. Mark your bust apex, the fullest part of your bust, on the pattern. Draw 2 lines, the first vertically through your bust apex along the full length of the bodice from shoulder to hem, and the second from the apex to the side seam at the underarm. Mark the seam or hem allowance at each end of the vertical line. Snip into the seam allowance at each end of the vertical line. Then, starting in the middle, cut along the vertical line, stopping a smidge before the seam allowances to create 2 hinges. Next, cut along the second line, stopping just before the apex to create another hinge. Place your front bodice pattern onto a piece of paper and tape it in place along the centre front. Then, using the hinges, pivot the side seam and sleeve pieces away from the centre front piece so you create a gap at the bust apex. This gap should be half the amount you want to add to the bodice in total, since the pattern represents half of the front bodice. Tape everything in place. Smooth out the shoulder seam and the side seam at the underarm using a ruler or pattern master, or you can do it freehand. Now to sort out the hemline. We need the bottom corner of the side seam to be a right angle. Starting 15mm or 5/8 of an inch in, draw a very gentle curve into a horizontal line at right angles to the centre front or grain line arrow. Extend this line to the centre front, then connect it to the centre front line with a 90-degree angle. Your pattern is now ready to cut out in fabric. Since the front bodice is now longer at the side seam, you'll need to ease the extra fabric into the back bodice when sewing them together. Thread your machine in a contrast colour, set it to the longest stitch length and turn the thread tension down to 0. Sew 3 rows of long gather stitches along each front bodice side seam, starting at the underarm and extending 10cm or about 4 inches or so along the seam. Position the rows of stitching around 5mm, 12mm and 18mm, or 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch from the raw edge. Don't back tack and leave loose tails at each end. When you come to join the front bodice to the back bodice, pin them together along the side seams, leaving the gathered part unpinned. At one end of the gather stitches, gently pull on the top 3 threads to ease the excess fabric until the front and back side seams are the same length. Even out the gathers and pin to the back bodice. Sew the side seams, this time using a matching thread and regular stitch length. Smooth out the gathers as you go, pausing with the needle down when you need to. Remove the gather stitches and that's it. A better fit without darts.